Hello, this is Selena. Welcome to the Little Book Room Storytime project. I'm going to be taking you on a little tour, a little walk around the Little Book Room. This was a lockdown project during this past difficult year of COVID, where I decided to just put together my collection of antique and vintage children's books and toys, set it all up into a little library. And the ultimate dream was to start a reading program in French and English for children in the neighborhood, to create an appreciation of good literature and do it in a fun and interactive environment with no devices to be seen. Interestingly enough, I really didn't purchase any of the furniture, the shelving. There was a lot of stuff I had stored from from renovations in the house. Just put them away in unused parts of the basement. And friends also, just not even knowing what I was doing, offered me bookshelves that they were throwing out. And the rest was from thrift stores, broken, abandoned, unwanted things. And I whiled away the long hours, the long weekends of being shut in, painting, sewing, and all of these quilts and cushions, the decorations on the cushions are all hand-stitched. Hours and hours of hand-stitching, which bears testimony to the long hours spent on Zoom and watching Netflix. So, let's begin the tour here. At this little space that I call the Little Book Room is at the foot of our basement stairs, the only little finished portion of the basement, which was never really used in all the years that we've lived here. It was just a sort of a storage space. So this is a little piece of artwork done by my daughter when she was little. I found it in a storage box. And the Little Book Room, the sign, again, it's an old picture frame, and I created the blackboard using blackboard paint. This is, I perfected the art of decoupage, transferring pictures onto furniture during this time. So these roses are from some lovely wrapping paper that I saw at a florist's, and they were happy to let me have a couple of sheets of them. This is a box that probably in the 70s and 80s was used to store potatoes and onions, and I use it now to store extra books. Some vintage bears, a set of bamboo shelves that I've had for many years and haven't used. This section is the little children's Bibles, little Bible stories. Some of them are beautiful vintage books from mid-century and earlier. This was an abandoned chair. It was quite hideous, a bamboo chair with a hideous vinyl cushion. It had a bit of a makeover, and I hand-stitched the edging, the red edging, and the colors on a plain yellow cushion that I've had for many years. This is a beautiful little doll's pram, a little dolly carriage from probably the late 40s, early 50s. There's also vintage dolly that I picked up, a sleep-eyed doll, and hand-stitched the little quilt with bits of fabric that I had left over from. People give me stuff and I collect them. They know I love crafting and sewing. So this little suite was made of 2 rocking chairs I picked up at 2 thrift stores, one at a garage sale, I think. The other was a pair of chairs from another thrift store, and did the decoupage on it. The table was a hideous old thing that must be maybe 50, 60 years old. It was just sitting in our garage for years and years and years. So altogether painted white, decoupaged, the flowers, and this is a lovely suite for children to sit and read. And this is a Raggedy Ann. She was in a terrible state. She needed to go into the washing machine. Her little pinafore was bleached. Her hair was shampooed. And here she is, as good as new. And this is a little vintage pool toy. And there's a set of all sorts of Raggedy Ann books inside. This picture, this wall hanging, has an interesting story. I was driving by in the old part of town, driving past a heritage house, and this it was undergoing renovations, and this beautiful old window frame was on the curb. I stopped. It's almost as tall as I am. I managed to lug it and stuff it into my hatchback. It was peeling and rotting, and it needed a lot of work. It needed sanding, painting, and lacquering, and I did. Scrubbed down the glass. And this was one of my most ambitious needlework projects to date. I used a Christmas card as inspiration, created the design, and then did an applique of the houses and the snow scene. It's with bits of fabric that I had saved. I think the only thing that I've literally purchased new and that is not old or unwanted was the clock. A friend gave me this beautiful wall plaque of Puss in Boots, which she said would be perfect for the library, which she had picked up at a second-hand store. And then months later, in a completely different city, I popped in at a thrift store and found these two, which belonged to the same set. So this is a Little Red Riding Hood. This is Hansel and Gretel. And together they make a beautiful trio. And this was also hand-stitched. I used an old abandoned frame that I picked up. Painted it white, and the wall hanging. It was a lot of hours of hand stitching, but so much joy to see the little girl and the little boy reading. This was an old trunk that I had to store my journals. It ran out of space, so I just tucked it away in a storeroom. It was an ugly beige color, so I decoupaged it red with red tissue paper, screwed on some wheels so that it could be moved around. It's quite heavy, and it's I use it to store teddy bears, some quilts, one of them made by my husband's great-grandmother, and hopefully one day there'll be teddy bears picnics in this room. These are two beautiful dolls. They're from the 60s. You can see from the fishnet stockings and the outfits that have probably been hand knitted by somebody's grandma. You can also see the vintage of these dolls from the painted eyes, typical of the 60s. This is a little dolly high chair, which it serves as a bookshelf now. Some Seuss books, some really old books. I've got some French textbooks here. This is a dolly from the 50s, and it's got, I think, what's known as a twist waist and twisted joints. It bends at the knees and it can kneel, and it's got sleepy eyes. You can know the vintage of the dolls from the kind of the rough coarseness of the hair. This is a doll from the 50s. They're known as the Revlon dolls. They were known as glamour dolls. They came with the sleepy eyes, the hair, painted nails, and lovely high heel shoes. One of the high heel shoes is missing, and the dress was torn and filthy, but I threw it in the washing machine in the gentle cycle, added some stiffening to the the skirt to make it all glamorous and Hollywoodish, and she's lovely. She's got a twist waist. And this was a dollhouse I picked up at a thrift store. It had splinters in it. It was cracked. I sanded it, painted it, and the lower floor works as a bookshelf for first edition Dr. Seuss books. Dr. Seuss books are very much in demand now after some of them were cancelled, banned for racism. It's such a pity, this cancel culture. But these are valuable first editions. And the top shelf works as a little dollhouse with real miniature doll furniture that works. And here is a beautiful plaque showing a little boy reading bedtime tales to his toys. This is the my Winnie the Pooh corner, A.A. Milne. Some of them are very old and some of them are first editions. Here we have a set of Rupert annuals, some going back to the 50s, and several other annuals. I've got a complete Seuss here. And more Seuss, the Bernstein Bears. Lots of annuals for those with a British background. There's a Cracker Jack book for boys, an Ideal book for girls. This was a chair that I found in a thrift store. It was already painted white, so I just decoupaged some of the roses on it to match. It is vintage, almost antique, I think. You can see from the design. And something that is of this caliber, I wouldn't have painted. But since it was painted already, that was fine. And the price was very attractive. It almost cost nothing. These are dolls from the 70s. They're big. They're really big. And they are wearing beautiful hand-knitted outfits that my children wore. The two dolls on the right-hand side and behind. This is a vintage hand-cut that belonged to the children of a lovely, very aged gentleman whose acquaintance I made one day when he was sitting on the curb and trying to sell some of his stuff before moving. And we became friends subsequently, and I bought a lot of stuff from him. These floor cushions and the cushions on the chairs are cushions that I had, but I used lockdown time to hand stitch the colorful patterns on them to make this a bright and inviting place. And this beautiful high chair is vintage. It must be from the 30s or the 40s. It has a leather strap and a silver buckle. It was on the curb with a sign saying free. It was really covered with decades-old food. I think pasta sauce and some greasy stuff. So lots of scrubbing and disinfecting later. I got a perfect little masterpiece here. And these are chairs I had from early in my married life that I couldn't bring myself to throw away. And I'm glad, because this chair and this little ottoman are perfect for this space. And here, a friend gave me these bookshelves. And here's a little suitcase for those who remember carrying these suitcases to school in the 70s. And here's a handcrafted train. And here's a set of Bobbsey twins from the 50s, 60s. These two green ones, these light green ones, are from the early 1900s. Picked them up at a garage sale for, I think, 25 cents each. They're worth a lot more. And these are vintage Nancy Drews from the 50s, and this one is from the 30s. The ones from the 30s are really worth a lot. They're hot ticket items on at auctions and online. And here I have almost the entire Hardy Boys series from the 60s. Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew in North America are really hot ticket items, just as Enid Blyton books are. in the colonies and Great Britain. These are various editions of Louisa May Alcott's books, the Little Women series, and there's lots of rare books that she had written that I never expected to see in print, and I've found them in thrift stores and a few online. These are the Heidi books, also various vintages, several different editions. Here I have some beautiful books from the early 1900s, late 1800s. These books are from the late 1800s, early 1900s. A handful of the books here belonged to me when I was a child. And this is an old high chair that belonged to the dear old gentleman I talked about. It was white in a terrible state. Painted it, lacquered it, and it works as a lovely bookshelf, set of bookshelves. And the bottom shelf is an old tray, a serving tray, which I painted to match and lacquered. And it holds a set of Richard Scarry books, many of them vintage, old, and quite valuable. These bookshelves I've had for many years, never used them, and now they're perfect. So this is the French section. French books here, French books here in this little antique doll crib, and set of atlas, what do you call this? I think they're called panorama books. You open them out, they're huge, and then they come out like a huge panorama. It's really quite interesting. These are the two cupboard doors from pantry cupboards when renovations were done. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away, and they are just perfect for this corner. So this cupboard with the little shelves that held the spice racks are now shelves for books. So this is my section of little golden books and little vintage readers. And here are classics, a complete set of little Beatrix Potter books, and vintage Ladybird books, which are also gaining in value. This tall set of bookshelves, also kind donation from a friend whose mom passed away and she didn't need it anymore. An old suitcase that's probably about 60 years old, which a friend brought from Hong Kong when she came to Canada as a student. Here's some vintage history books, vintage readers. These are Canada's best-selling author L.M. Montgomery's books. A couple of them are very early editions and very valuable. I have got some little golden encyclopedias here, and some very, very, very old books. This is a lovely little Norman Rockwell plate that is called The Storyteller, and it's perfect for here. Grandpa is reading stories to his little granddaughter. And these are two embroidered pillowcases that were done by my daughter's great-grandmother. She stitched one each for each of them. My daughters are grown up now, so these are framed and they are perfect. I think these were done about 60 years ago, so they are perfect for this pot. And this little, I love to sit on this chair. I love to hide away in this room, so this is where I sit to read, sometimes to think, just so to catch my breath. And this is a little vintage cradle. This doll is from the 30s. The sleep eyes don't really work very well, but it was just a beauty, just primitive, and just the beginning of the evolution of dolls, I would say. And Anne of Green Gables in a little vintage schoolhouse desk. And this is the encyclopedia section. little dictionaries, and a little set of steps that was also in a very bad shape. But that's always a challenge for me. I can never resist that kind of challenge. Sanded it, painted it, did a decoupaged a coaster to match. This little pull cart says I love bears, and it's got all the bear books in it, mostly Paddington Bear. And this is the Enid Blyton section. Some antique roller skates and a hand-carved bus. And these are my pride and joy. Some of these are really valuable first editions. There's The River of Adventure, The Circus of Adventure. And this one is called Silver and Gold by Enid Blyton. Beautiful primitive binding, silver and gold etched lettering, published in 1925. I didn't even know that she published that early. And this is a little princess, a 1920s edition, I think. And Small Boys in Big Boots, not familiar with the title, but published in the 1890s. All of these purchased at thrift stores. And Noddy, I have almost the entire series of Noddy. A lot of them got for nothing, pretty much. So here we are, Enid Blyton. William books, for those who remember William. About most of them are from my childhood, and a couple that I picked up at thrift stores. The Abbey Girls series, and these guys are Thornton Burgess, the little animal stories that are very similar to Beatrix Potter. There's an entire Trixie Belden series, an entire Uncle Arthur's Bedtime Tales, some Lassie books. There are some really, really old books in this corner. And these are the miniature books. They're fairly old. Beatrix Potter, some little picture books from the 50s. This little scooter was sitting out in my garden, but it was so pretty, and after a couple of summers it was beginning to rot. I thought it was sad, so I sanded it and painted it and brought it in here, so it's great. It holds the Mary Poppins collection and a boxed set of Judy Blume. This is a little doll, baby wetting doll. It actually wets, from the 50s, I think. And that concludes almost, I think, yes, the tour of the little book room. I hope you enjoyed the little tour. This is my garden in the winter. I think that, yes, like my garden is my hideaway in the summer. This has been my hideaway and my little haven in the cold weather. And I think my childhood fantasy come true. I always dreamed of a library that I had complete access to when I was a little girl. Just to have to wait 1 week to go back and get another book was killing. It really was. So now I've actually started rereading some of these books, and from an adult perspective, yes, you can see the racism sometimes, very often, Mark Twain, even Enid Blyton. But if you look at it from the context of the times, and with the understanding that we cannot erase history, we cannot rewrite history, but we can use history to recreate ourselves and to see life from a more intelligent and a kinder, more thoughtful and perspective, I think. So anyway, thank you for walking with me and sharing my joy in the little book room. Bye.